Om Ganat Timidandasya Gananjana Shlakaya Chakshuran Meditam Yena Tusmai Shigurave Namaha. So today we've been studying what's called the ISKCON Disciple Course, and one of the main reasons for studying the ISKCON Disciple Course and understanding what it means to be a disciple in ISKCON is to understand the importance of Srila Prabhupada's position and how to maintain Srila Prabhupada's teaching and example in the center of everyone's consciousness within the International Society for Krishna Consciousness. And the reason for that is because Srila Prabhupada is a very special devotee. Srila Prabhupada's history was that he was sent down directly by Krishna into the material world to do something which no acharya had ever done before, which is bringing Krishna consciousness into the world of people who didn't know anything about Krishna consciousness, the Western world. And that's spoken about in Srila Prabhupada's Pranam Mantra, Namaste Saraswati Deve Gauravani Pacharni Nirvashesha Shunyavadi Paschacha Dejatarni. You've come to teach in the Western world. So he has really shown the position of being a Jagat Guru. Now that word Jagat Guru, many people call themselves Jagat Gurus, but they're not Jagat Gurus. They're just Kula Gurus, village Gurus. But a Jagat Guru is one who spreads Krishna consciousness all over, in fact, the universe. So Srila Prabhupada's position, he's called a Shaktavesh avatar. Avatar means to descend. Shaktavesh means given the power by the Supreme Personality of Godhead to carry out a specific mission. And there have been other Shaktavesh avatars. Lord Buddha was a Shaktavesh avatar. Prithu Maharaj is a Shakta avatar, Shaktavesh avatar. And Srila Prabhupada is a Shaktavesh avatar, but his mission is just beginning. Prabhupada mentioned this. His mission is actually, as the Bhagavatam states, to create a revolution, a spiritual revolution in the misdirected lives of a very impious civilization in Kali Yuga. If you haven't discovered it yet, we are in Kali Yuga. Kali Yuga means Manda Samanda Matayo Manda Bhagyo Patra. People are unfortunate, short-lived, and the last principle of religiosity, which is truthfulness, is almost gone now. Just read the news. The other principles, cleanliness, mercifulness, austerity, they are gone. But truthfulness, the one leg upon which the bull of religion is standing, is gone. So therefore, it is essential, because of Srila Prabhupada's mission, he has been sent here for the purpose of reforming society, to maintain his presence in people's lives. And so we're going to speak about that today. This presentation is called The Four Generations. Now, what we mean by generations is not to generate something, but you have father, then you have son, and then you have grandson and great-grandson. Those are like four generations. So there's also four generations of spiritual leaders. There's Prabhupada, his disciples, disciples of his disciples, and disciples of his disciples. And you can go on forever and ever. But this is a study of four generations coming from Prabhupada and the challenges that we have simply because of something called the time factor, and also because people have imperfections. They make mistakes. They cheat, they have imperfect senses. This is mentioned in the Vedas. So as time goes on, time takes away everything. As it's said in the Bhagavatam, Kalena Sarvatra Gabira Ranghasa. Time is very deep. And Krishna in the Bhagavad Gita says, Kalo Asmi, I am time. And what Krishna does is the time factor in the universal form. He destroys everything. He envelops or absorbs everything. So we have to be very careful to protect things in time because of the principle also of entropy. Things tend to fall apart unless you put energy into them. So it's very important for us to maintain Srila Prabhupada's understanding and teaching throughout the ages. But let's just talk about 4 generations now. And the title of this is the Fading Acharya. And you see this practically in every religion in the world. You have one great personality. Things change the next generation, and by the time you get to the 10th generation, you cannot even recognize the original teachings of the person who came down. Every religion in the world is bona fide. We are not sectarian in the Krishna consciousness movement. We are not saying we're the only ones. However, things have changed, and we don't want things to change in our teachings either. We want to maintain that integrity. So this is called the Fading Acharya, the dangers of the 4 generations. And it's not just 4 generations, just dealing with 4 generations today. So we have 4 generations. That's Prabhupada, first generation. Then after that, his disciples. I'm in the picture. So then disciples of his disciples. I'm not going to tell you where. I used to be young. Maybe one of the little ladies was holding me as her baby in that picture. So anyway, disciples of his disciples. So these are the 4 generations. So we're dealing with different issues, not only issues, but instructions, context, and intention. Because each time someone says something, not just Prabhupada, they're saying things according to a particular situation. Time, place, and circumstance, right? I mean, sometimes you'll say something, even you, I, will say one thing, and then we'll say another thing contradictory in another situation, right? Depending on the situation. So, the first generation understands very well the intention of Prabhupada. Intention means, what was he trying to accomplish by saying something or doing something? And first generation understands the context. What was happening around when Srila Prabhupada said that? And they understand the instructions. What did Srila Prabhupada say? And the next, and also understand the issues. What were the challenges? And then the second generation only understands those 3 things. The issues, instructions, and context. Third generation, only the issues and instructions. And the 4th generation, only the issues. Now, I'm not saying that this has to happen. It's not necessary, but it's something that happens practically in every society, even in the business field, it happens like that. So what happens? What's the question here? Why are these things being lost? Let's talk about intention. That's Prabhupada's will. What is Prabhupada's will? Well, Prabhupada is a pure devotee. And, of course, we cannot understand Prabhupada's internal mood, but we can understand what he intended. What was his intention? To bring people closer to Krishna. That was his motivation, to change the world, to help people. He was motivated by compassion. Try to understand that. That's his personality. And that was his aim, to bring people, and his mood, and the purpose. You really have to understand purposes, which is, in philosophy, that's called teleology, the study of purposes, to understand anything. I mean, for example, let's ask the standard question in science. Why is the sky blue? What's the answer to that? What? It's because of the gases? That's not why the sky is blue. That's how the sky is blue. No, you're describing the how process. But why implies why. You know, when I ask you, oh, let's say I ask Ayush, how did you get, so why did you come here, Ayush? He said, my parents brought me. I said, you didn't answer the question. You didn't answer my question. I said, why? Why implies intention. He could say, my parents forced me. That's another thing. But to simply say how we got here, so why is the sky blue? Because Krishna wants it. How it's blue, you got refraction, there's white light reflected the atmosphere, depending on what level the atmosphere goes through. It's, it's red. Sometimes it's red. If you got a good sunset, it's not necessarily blue. So so the intention or the personality behind everything has to be understood. So this is a very important question, otherwise you don't understand anything. You just see the parts or the trees, but not the forest. So the context obviously means, where was Prabhupada? What time was it? Who was he talking to? The place he was at? That means the people he was, that's a fancy word, interlocutors, which means who is he with or talking to at the same time? Because sometimes you find contradictory instructions. Like one time Prabhupada said to a sannyasi, your business is to travel and preach, never remain in the same place for very long. And then to another sannyasi, Prabhupada said, your business is only to stay in one place. So, here's contradictory sannyasi instructions, right? Depending on the circumstance. So there's all sorts of instructions like that Prabhupada gave, circumstances again. So different followers have different instructions. I mean, I was given some very interesting instructions by Prabhupada, but some of them were time, place, and manner instructions. One instruction was to make sure that Prabhupada had, everyone in South America had all of his books. Guess where I am now? Am I in South America? I'm somewhere else. So what happened? Am I disobeying Prabhupada's instruction? No, because that's the intention and context. I was helping develop the preaching mission in South America, myself and working with Hridayananda Maharaj, and we opened up a whole continent to Krishna consciousness. So there are instructions which look contradictory. That's intention and context. So instructions of Prabhupada are in his books, his lectures, conversations, letters, personal instructions, etc. And many of these instructions appear to be contradictory, such as in the letters. So here's some issues, that Prabhupada had to deal with. One was divorces. Now, we don't approve of divorces, but sometimes people got divorced. So let's say in one particular circumstance, one devotee asked Prabhupada for divorce, and Prabhupada said, yes, you have my blessings. And the other devotees were saying, oh my God, Prabhupada, how can you say such a thing? Previously you've said such and such against divorces. And Prabhupada said, the reason I said it, Prabhupada explained his intention. The reason I said he was going to do it anyway. And if he acted against my instruction, it would be a double offense. So I gave him permission. So that's one example. And another thing that they're discussing right now in ISKCON is women Diksha Gurus or female Diksha Gurus. And of course Prabhupada did say that all of his disciples, men and women, would one day become, all the ones who were following one day could become gurus. But sometimes people pull other quotes out that Srila Prabhupada said about ladies. So you have these quote wars. You have quote wars, different quotes for different folks, different shlokas for different folks. And so you have some problem there. And relationship, this is a managerial question, relationship between the GBC and the National Council. We're discussing now in the GBC. The GBC is supposed to be GBC is the governing body commission. And whether it's supposed to be the ultimate legal authority as well as the ultimate managerial authority. This may be a little complex for here. So these are different discussions that are going on. And so the second generation is missing the intention. They just take things out of context and say, not understand what Prabhupada was trying to do. And so it has to be reconstructed. And I'm going to give a solution for this whole thing. It has to be reconstructed by understanding the context. And there's arguments as a result of that. And sometimes things are being stifled. For example, the GBC is discussing right now whether there should be female Diksha Gurus. And It gets stifled means put on hold. That's what it means. For 20 years until we all pass away. So, and so the third generation, there's a solution to these problems. I'm going to tell you the solution after we're finished. You're missing the context and the intention, which also should be reconstructed by memories and association with direct disciples. But remember, by this time, many of the direct disciples have gone back to home, back to Godhead. And the fourth generation, missing the instructions, context, and intention, which have to be revived by a system of education. Now here's the interesting thing, the real challenge is here. We had this big meeting between all the devotees called the ISKCON Leadership Sangha, not just GBC leaders, and we met and we took some polls. We had approximately 750 devotees in the audience. Only 259 completed a survey. That's normal. That's not bad. You know, you're lucky if you get 35% to complete a survey. That is very normal. The average years that the people responded in ISKCON was 19 years. It means very mature. I don't know. I guess I'm more mature, 50 years. Anyways. So here's the average amount that people read the Bhagavad Gita amongst those people was only 4 times. That means some people had only read it once or maybe a half of Bhagavad Gita, and some people had read it more. That's average. Just gives you an idea. Over 130 devotees had only read it 1 or 2 times in their life. And Srimad Bhagavatam, the average amount of times that devotees had read the first canto of Srimad Bhagavatam was 1.96 times, second canto 1.59, 12th canto 1.05. That means some devotees had never read it. Chaitanya Charitamrita, average amount of times 0.92 times. This is after 19 years. Nectar of Devotion 1.8 times. Here's Prabhupada stressing his books, reading his books. GBC means leaders, that they will see that in every temple these books are very thoroughly being read and discussed and understood and applied in practical life. Because Srila Prabhupada's books are direct connection with Srila Prabhupada. Srila Prabhupada said, I will live forever in these books. So that's why great devotees like Aditya Narayan Prabhu, where's he? Is he there? He's outside. They're dedicated to distributing Srila Prabhupada's books. So, but Prabhupada said that books are not simply for distribution, they're for studying, because every word in Srila Prabhupada's books enables one to connect with Krishna. Prabhupada said, our first job is to make sure that every one of the devotees in our zone is management is reading regularly our literatures and discussing the subject matter seriously from different angles of seeing. What good are many, many devotees if none of them are knowledgeable? That's Swara Prabhu, who is presenting Prabhupada with a new book. Prabhupada said, if you want to stay in Krishna consciousness, you have to develop firm faith in Guru and Shastra. Therefore, you must study my books very scrutinizingly, follow the 4 regulated principles very strictly, and chant 16 rounds daily, avoiding the 10 offenses. Don't take this movement as something cheap. You must all study very scrutinizingly all the books, so that when the need arises, you can repeat in your own words their purport. And of course, this is the famous example of boiling the milk. At one point in the movement, and I was there, when Prabhupada said, don't try to bring so many new people into Krishna consciousness, boil the milk. In other words, get everybody studying Srila Prabhupada's books, get everybody strict in their sadhana, so they can become very refined in their Krishna consciousness. This is Prabhupada's statement. I want that we shall concentrate on making our devotees Krishna conscious and ourselves becoming Krishna conscious, and not be so much concerned with expanding ourselves widely, but without any spiritual content. Just like boiling the milk, it becomes thicker and sweeter. Now do like that, boil the milk. So here's the chart again from the other generations. So the solution to this quandary is studying Prabhupada's books, which Prabhupada said are law books for human society, and also study books about Srila Prabhupada. Because if you want to understand Prabhupada's intention, we have published, or devotees have published, so many books that are biographical or memories of Srila Prabhupada, and they can help one understand Srila Prabhupada. Now, we're very unique in the Krishna consciousness movement because never in the annals of history before have there been so much direct information, first-hand information about the founder, about the person who came down from the spiritual world. So we should take advantage of that. And if you take advantage of that, connect with Srila Prabhupada, you will actually be connected to the disciplic succession. You'll have the spiritual potency to be Krishna conscious. And that is the purpose of this whole disciple course, to make sure that people accept spiritual masters and connect with His divine grace, Srila Prabhupada, and be part of Srila Prabhupada's mission. So, want to keep that short since we've been speaking all day long. So, anyone have any questions about this? Yes.
Yeah, I find that when I read Prabhupada's books, it's like, I don't know, I find it amazing. It's like Krishna's just talking.
Yes. Very good. Thank you, Sukardinam. Yes, when you read Prabhupada's books, Prabhupada commented that Krishna is dictating through him and coming and having him write these words or speak these words that appear in his books. Other questions?
Hare Krishna Maharaj.
Haribol.
Thank you for facilitating this course. It's so wonderful. My question is regarding the slide that you showed that Prabhupada said boiling the milk,
Yeah.
right? So how can we understand where the context is missing? Because we are...
Okay.
You got it. Yes.
Thank you for the question. Yeah, what happened, this was a very interesting time in the Krishna conscious movement. Devotees got very much into the number game. This is mainly in the Western world. There was even, just like you have the Sankirtan newsletter, where you get a certain amount of points for distributing books, which is good, Prabhupada loved that. But they were giving Sika points. In other words, there was a competition by how many people you could get to shave their heads. This enthusiasm was, I think Sadhvi will remember this one. And how many people you could get to spend the night at the temple, even if you had to take the spark plugs out of their car to get them to spend the night at the temple. So there was too much concern with that, and the devotees were neglecting their own personal sadhana. Sadhana, of course, means waking up early and chanting, and whenever possible, and chanting your rounds and reading Srila Prabhupada's books and cultivating a mood of devotion and offering your food to Krishna, being careful what you eat. I mean, these are all part and parcel of becoming Krishna conscious. Remember, at that time, we were dealing mainly with brahmacharis and brahmacharinis in the movement. So Prabhupada was very concerned with that neglect of the Krishna conscious, of actual Krishna consciousness. And I mean, I'll give you a practical example. When I was a young brahmachari, one of the first things I did was travel with a sannyasi, who should remain nameless, to protect the innocent. And so we thought, let's just preach enthusiastically. It doesn't matter. We don't need sadhana anymore. We don't, we need to chant, obviously chant. He didn't let me have time to chant. That's another story. But we don't need to so much. We just need to preach Krishna consciousness and bring people to Krishna consciousness. So our whole idea of eating prasadam was to go into the supermarket, get a grocery bag full of different things, and put it to our head and chant Hare Krishna and dig in. And buy all sorts of things, regardless of who prepared it, because whoever prepares food, it affects the consciousness. So we noticed after 2-3 days our consciousness was going down, and then we started to prepare our own food. In fact, I was cooking food in the back of a van as the van was moving, using a gasoline stove. But anyway, that's another interesting story. So in other words, there was some neglect. We experienced that there was some neglect of the sadhana, the practice, because one of the most important aspects of Krishna consciousness is to practice being Krishna conscious. Now, you may say, why do I have to practice if it's natural? But let's say one is trying to learn how to play the piano. Then you have to practice first before you can become spontaneous. In the same way, there has to be this vaidhi, this practice, before we actually imbibe the spirit, the complete spirit of Krishna consciousness in our hearts. And every single religion, every single yoga practice has that. So there was a neglect. And people weren't reading Prabhupada's books, and you couldn't preach without reading Prabhupada's books. You couldn't be Krishna conscious without reading Prabhupada's books. So that was the context. Things were wild. It was Wild West. Without
Thank you
the
so
guns.
much. Thank you, Maharaj.
Yeah. So see, these things are important while Prabhupada's disciples are present on this planet, which is not going to be much longer. Then the devotees should ask these questions, note them down, and read the history of ISKCON. There's many books about this too. Yes.
Hare Krishna Maharaj, thank you so much for the lecture. So my question is, somehow we are missing reading the books this generation, and that goes to the last in the to-do list. We have services, we have chanting and other things to do. So it's not regular often, and I see that when I miss reading regularly, it affects everything else. So could you help? How could I fix that as a daily routine?
You have to make a promise or vow or whatever to read a certain amount every day. Even if I think there's even an app, right? Be a sage page by page. Of course, I don't use an app to read, but just make a promise. I'm going to read a few pages a day, a certain amount of pages a day. And another thing you can do is take advantage of modern technology. There's many audio books. Actually, all the Prabhupada's books are audio books right now. And while you're cooking, while you're cleaning, while you're driving your car, listen. And then you can get hours and hours and hours. I mean, when I do my Didi Puja in the morning, I'm listening to either memories of Prabhupada or Prabhupada speaking or some class, and I'm taking advantage of that time. So take advantage of the time to hear, because without hearing and chanting, then we lose our connection with Krishna. Then we won't be able to serve with devotion. It's a very, very important principle. And practically to keep sight of the context and intention, then you have to reading Prabhupada's biographies is important. So, any other questions or comments? Yes, you.
So Maharaj, if somebody is planning to get initiated, so is it mandatory to leave onion, garlic and caffeine products, or is it okay if sometimes it's
That's a good question. Onion and garlic, first of all, it's mandatory to offer your food to Krishna, to eat prasadam. And Krishna, somehow or other, doesn't eat garlic and onions for various reasons. And garlic and onions bring down one's consciousness, because each and every type of food is associated with different modes of nature. There's food in the mode of goodness, passion, and ignorance. Garlic can be accepted as a medicine, but not as a spice. I mean, yes, to answer your question, yes. Yeah, go ahead.
Is this mentioned somewhere in the scriptures that it's like Krishna doesn't like onion and
Actually, in the Manu Samhita, that's mentioned about onions and garlic. Many of the Puranas, too, there's stories about onions and garlic. And basically, it is also common sense. If anyone has eaten garlic, they probably know what I'm talking about. What's that? I mean, anyway, it definitely has an effect on the consciousness. Even Well, I hate to say this, but even pilots are not supposed to eat food with garlic in it before they fly an airplane. Yeah. Even the pilots, because their reflexes go down. I mean, there's actually scientific reasons too.
But according to scientific reasons, Maharaj, there are many more food items which come under tamogunam and which affect the consciousness levels. But still, why only we are following only these four? Like any particular reason for only these things? Because when I was going through the tamogunam list, I could find many other things. Even I saw that brinjal is also having that effect.
Well, too much of anything in the wrong proportion, too much sugar affects the consciousness too. But garlic and onions specifically, in any quantity. I mean, we can get into later on a whole scientific discussion of this, but that's the Vaishnava tradition. I mean, if you go to any of the really strict Vaishnava temples in India, there's no garlic or onions. Like if you go to Tirupati or other temples like that, there's no garlic or onions. It's a standard traditional understanding.
And moreover, it is because it reduces the life force in you.
Yes, I mean, there's Ayurvedic reasons too. And any of these things have a medicinal use. We're not saying they're bad. Everything has a medicinal use. Krishna has put it for some specific purpose. I mean, I specifically recommended a particular devotee take garlic a few years ago when she had an infection and the doctors couldn't cure the infection. They wanted to take away her arm. Wanted to cut her arm off because it was MRSA. You know what MRSA is? That means an infection that's antibiotic resistant. And they couldn't find an antibiotic. So she ate garlic like an apple. Not something I would suggest for taste. And the infection went away in 3 days. So it's very powerful antibiotic and antiviral. But everything has a use. Krishna has put it there for specific use. Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Maharaj.
Okay, I think we should end now because we've been going the whole day. And I just came back from Europe at 2 o'clock in the morning, so...
So, Hare Krishna, I was just going to make the announcement. Maharaj just arrived at 2 a.m. from Europe, and he's actually giving the class from 12:30 to 5:30. So let's big Hari Bol to Maharaj.
Srila Prabhupada ki jai.